When Burkina Faso's transitional president, Ibrahim Traoré, arrived at an event meant to honor his national achievements, something unexpected happened. As he tried to enter, a security guard stopped him, unsure of who he was. What could have been a scandal quickly turned into a moment that touched hearts worldwide, leaving social media buzzing and bringing tears to the crowd. What Traoré did next showed the true essence of leadership. It was a scorching Tuesday afternoon in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. The streets were alive with excitement. As flags of the country fluttered in the breeze, children wore t-shirts that read "Our Hero, Ibrahim Traoré." This was no ordinary day. It was a day of recognition, celebrating President Traoré's achievements in bringing peace, feeding the poor, and restoring dignity to the people. Thousands of people filled the National Civic Arena for the event. But when a plain, unmarked Toyota arrived at the VIP entrance, a lone security officer raised his hand. He approached the car and firmly said, "Excuse me, sir. I can't let you in without a badge." Inside the car was President Ibrahim Traoré. He had no entourage, no sirens. He had come quietly, as he always did. "I am Ibrahim Traoré," he said calmly. The security guard furrowed his brow, laughing nervously. "No, sir, the president doesn't come like this." Onlookers started to gather, and phones began to record. But the president didn't get angry. He didn't demand a change or call for backup. Instead, he stood still and did something unexpected that left the crowd and the internet in awe. Rather than showing his ID or forcing his way through, he smiled and stepped away from the entrance. Slowly, he began walking down the side of the building, past confused vendors, surprised guards, and murmuring journalists who were questioning, "Is that really him?" His aides tried to intervene, but Traoré gestured for them to stop. "No," he said softly. "Let the people see me this way." A young child, barefoot and holding a piece of roasted corn, ran up to him asking, "Why are you outside, Mr. President?" Traoré bent down to his level and replied, "Because today is not about me. It's about all of us." A grandmother, watching from behind a fence, wiped away tears as Traoré continued his walk around the back of the arena. People began following him. No security, no grand entrance, just the man and the people. When he reached a small side gate, the guards there recognized him and immediately stood at attention. But Traoré raised a finger and said, "Please, don't open the gate. I want to enter like everyone else." Inside the arena, the master of ceremonies was about to announce his arrival, unaware that the real story was unfolding outside. Organizers inside were growing anxious. The president was very late. His special seat, handcrafted by local artists, remained empty, and a spotlight shone down on it. People whispered, "Where is he?" Meanwhile, outside, Traoré stood in line with regular citizens, waiting quietly beside a farmer and two schoolboys. The farmer, unaware, asked him, "Are you here for the event?" Traoré smiled and nodded. "Yes, I'm hoping to learn something." The farmer chuckled and said, "They say the president is a good man." When Traoré finally entered the arena, not through the VIP entrance, but the public one, gasps filled the air. Children stopped eating. Elderly women placed their hands on their hearts, and some began to cry. The music stopped, and all eyes turned toward him. He had no guards, no fanfare, just a dusty white shirt and sandals. A silence so deep fell over the arena, it felt like time itself had paused. Then, one by one, the crowd stood not to applaud, but in reverence. An old man shouted, "He walks with us because he is one of us." The arena erupted in emotion. Back at the VIP gate, the young security guard stood frozen. Someone whispered in his ear that the person he had stopped was the president. His eyes widened in shock. He looked down at the list of names in his hand, realizing there was no photo of the president. He thought he was just doing his job. But now, his heart sank. People began filming him, some mocking, others laughing. But then, a firm hand touched his shoulder, and when he turned, it was Traoré himself. The president had circled back. "No one should blame you," Traoré said softly. "You did what was right. You followed the rules. Burkina Faso needs men like you." The guard, visibly moved, trembled and Traoré embraced him in front of the cameras. That hug, broadcast to the world, broke the internet within hours, with hashtags like #HumblePresident and #GuardOfHonor trending. But inside the arena, something even more powerful was unfolding. Traoré walked onto the stage, but he wasn't holding notes or speeches. Instead, he carried something else, something raw and emotional. As he stepped in front of the crowd, he unfolded a photograph of a small boy in tattered sandals, standing in front of a broken mud house. "This," Traoré said, "is me." A gasp went through the crowd. He paused, letting the silence fill the room. "I wasn't born in a palace. I didn't grow up with power." That day, he pointed to the photo I ate once and drank from. A cracked plastic bottle. His voice broke. "But someone believed in me, my mother, my teachers, my neighbors. Burkina Faso believed in me." A woman in the audience began to sob, followed by another and another. "No amount of titles," he continued, "will ever separate me from where I came from. I am not your leader because I am above you. I am your leader because I walk with you." The entire arena stood, not to cheer, but to cry. Behind the stage, a special chair had been built for the president, carved from rare wood and embroidered with gold thread. It was meant to honor Traoré, to show the nation's respect. But as applause grew louder, the chair remained empty. Traoré stood before it, shook his head, and walked past it to sit on a simple wooden bench where the cleaning crew usually sat. The audience was stunned. "What is he doing?" someone whispered. A little girl in the front row turned to her mother and asked, "Why won't he sit in his chair?" Her mother, wiping her eyes, answered, "Because his heart is bigger than that chair." Traoré looked at the people around him, the ushers, the stage workers, the volunteers, and nodded. To each of them, "I'm not here to be served," he said softly. "I'm here to serve." The moment was captured on camera and spread across the globe. News outlets like BBC, CNN, and Al Jazeera, as well as social media platforms like Facebook and TikTok, were flooded with questions. Is this the most humble president in the world? What happened next would shake the soul of the nation and the hearts of the world. As President Traoré sat quietly on the workers' bench, a soft murmur began to rise from the crowd. "Did you see what he did? I've never seen a president sit. There, is he okay?" But then, a voice broke through the whispers. It was soft, trembling, and it came from the second row. An elderly woman in her 70s, Awa Sanu, a retired midwife from Bobolasso, slowly stood up. Leaning on her wooden cane, she asked the organizers if she could speak. At first, they hesitated, unsure, but Traoré raised his hand to give his approval. A microphone was handed to her, and the entire arena fell silent again. She looked directly at the president and began, "You don't know me," her voice breaking. "But years ago, when rebels burned my clinic and my husband was killed, you came." Traoré's eyes widened in recognition. "You weren't president then, just a soldier. But you carried my daughter 5 miles to safety." The crowd gasped, and cameras zoomed in. Traoré stood stunned, but Awa continued, "And today, you've shown the world again that you don't need a title to be great. You just need a heart." The audience erupted in emotion, many sobbing, but Awa wasn't finished yet. She reached into her worn handbag and pulled out a small white cloth, carefully wrapped in a plastic sleeve. It looked old and faded, but under the bright lights of the arena, one thing became clear, a deep brown-red stain across the middle. With trembling hands, she held it up. "This," she said, "was the cloth you wrapped my daughter's foot in when she was bleeding." Traoré's face went pale, and he stood slowly. Awa continued, her voice steady despite the tears. "I never threw it away. Not because it was clean, but because it saved my daughter's life." The crowd went silent. Even the camera crew wiped their eyes. Awa walked forward and gently placed the cloth in the president's hands. He knelt in front of her, his face full of emotion, whispering something only the cameras could catch. He said, "I remember that day. I just didn't know it mattered this much." Awa embraced him, like a mother hugging her son. In that moment, there were no politics, no fame, no ceremony, just humanity. But the emotional wave wasn't over yet. Outside the arena, something incredible was happening. Traffic had come to a halt not because of an accident, but because thousands of people, men, women, even children, were walking toward the arena in complete silence. No one told them to come. They just heard. They heard what had happened about the bench, the speech, and the cloth, and they came. Some carried candles, some held flowers, and others came with nothing but their bare feet. Inside, Traoré stepped outside for some air, and what he saw made him freeze for a moment. The street was full, but no one was shouting. They simply stood there, hands over their hearts, as if silently saying thank you. A young boy, maybe 8 years old, ran forward, holding his school report card. "I want to give this to you, President," he said, "because you're the reason I'm still in school." Traoré bent down, took the card gently, and hugged the boy. The cameras caught the moment, and in less than an hour, global media outlets picked it up. The cameras caught the moment, and in less than an hour, global media outlets picked it up. Burkina Faso's president turns event into human moment. This is what leadership looks like. But what happened next was beyond anyone's imagination. Just as the crowd was settling from their tears, a rustling noise came from the back of the arena. It was the young security guard, the same one who had mistakenly stopped Ibrahim Traoré at the gate. Earlier, he walked slowly, his eyes red, hands shaking. 2 other guards tried to stop him, but Traoré noticed and waved them off. The young man walked down the aisle, past ministers, generals, and elders, then fell to his knees before the president. "I didn't know. I didn't recognize you," the guard cried. "I was just trying to do my job." Traoré said nothing, but the room held its breath. Then the president walked up to him, knelt beside him, and gently helped him stand. "You were doing exactly what this country needs," Traoré said softly. "You followed your duty, even when you were unsure." The guard broke down in tears in Traoré's arms. In that moment, something strange happened. All the soldiers standing around the arena began to clap, not just for Traoré, but for the idea that no man and no title is above accountability. Once again, the internet exploded, but no one knew that Traoré had one final, deeply personal reason for attending this event, a reason he hadn't yet revealed. As the program resumed, the organizers invited Traoré to the stage, but when he walked up, he politely declined the golden chair reserved just for him. Instead, he walked to the very last row, where no cameras were focused, and sat beside a young disabled girl named Marama. She had been quietly invited with her mother after writing a letter months earlier that went viral. In her letter, she had asked, "President Traoré, will you ever sit next to someone like me?" She had never received a reply, but now as the president sat beside her and gently held her hand, the answer was clear. The hall fell silent again, and tears returned. Then Traoré asked for the microphone. With all eyes on him, he said, "This chair was never meant to be mine alone. It belongs to every Burkinabe child who dreams, every mother who struggles, every father who falls but stands again. That's who built this country. I'm just sitting among them today." Even the journalists lowered their cameras. The moment wasn't for headlines. It was for healing. But as powerful as that was, nothing could compare to what happened the next morning. Before sunrise, with no press, no entourage, and just a plain vehicles, Ibrahim Traoré did something no one could have expected. He visited a quiet cemetery on the outskirts of Ouagadougou. Only a few old, nameless grave markers stood there, and he walked to one in particular, a simple, unpainted grave. It belonged to his best friend, a young soldier named Adama Coulibaly, who had died saving Traoré during a rebel ambush years ago. Traoré had never spoken publicly about him, but this morning, alone with a small flower in hand, he knelt beside the grave and whispered, "Everything I do to honor your sacrifice." He sat there for 30 minutes, silently remembering. Then, a child from a nearby village recognized him. Soon, dozens of children, barefoot, gathered from behind the trees. Traoré smiled at them and waved them over. Right there, in the dust, he started drawing in the sand with the children. A president, in silence, drawing stars and flags with kids. That photo would go on to become the image of the year. But what no one knew was that Traoré was preparing for one final speech, one that would shake the entire world. Just hours away, by afternoon, the news had spread like wildfire. The president knelt at a cemetery, sat with a disabled girl, hugged a security guard. This was leadership. This was humanity. The story continued to unfold in ways no one could have imagined, leaving the world in awe of what true leadership looks like. After the emotional outpouring, social media couldn't stop buzzing. Every post seemed to end with the same sentiment: who leads like this anymore? But while the nation was still catching its breath, Ibrahim Traoré made a quiet phone call to the event organizers. He had one final request: not to speak from the podium, not to take the closing anthem. He asked to walk through the crowd, unguarded, and let people share their stories. Just for 1 hour, he said, no speeches, let the real heroes speak. The team was unsure. Was this wise? Was it safe? But they agreed, and just before sunset, Traoré walked down the center aisle of the arena. No jacket, no microphone, just a chair in his hand. He placed the chair in the middle of the crowd and sat. Then he pointed to the first man he saw, an elderly retired farmer, and gently whispered, "Tell us what you survived." The old man stood, trembling, and began to speak. One by one, others rose: women, widows, veterans, street children, each person sharing their story, each story leaving the crowd in tears. But it was the last story that would bring Traoré to his knees. A small voice, no older than 9, rose from the far right. She was thin, barefoot, and holding a folded piece of cloth. Everyone turned to see her walking slowly toward President Traoré. When she stood before him, she unfolded the cloth, revealing a dusty, torn photograph of a soldier standing beside Traoré years ago during a mission in the north. "My papa said you saved him once," she whispered, "but he didn't make it home the second time." The crowd fell silent. Tears began to fall. Traoré stared at the photo, frozen, and then reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a worn prayer bead, the same one her father had carried. "I've kept this since the day he died in my arms," he said gently. "I never forgot." With both hands, he gave it back to the little girl. She held it to her chest and collapsed in tears. In that moment, no words were needed. The image went viral in minutes. But what the cameras didn't capture was Ibrahim Traoré crying, too, not as a president, but as a brother, a soldier, and a man who remembered everything. After the emotional stories, night began to fall. Most thought the day was over. But Traoré stood once more and made an unexpected announcement. "Tomorrow morning, I will walk. No cars, no soldiers, just me, and anyone who wants to walk with me across the city." The organizers tried to advise against it, arguing it was too risky, too disorganized. But Traoré simply said, "Let the people lead. I will follow." And so, the next morning, as the sun rose over Ouagadougou, the streets filled with thousands, not for protest, not for politics, but to walk with a man who had proven his heart. Mothers held their children. Old men brought flags. Farmers, teachers, nurses, everyone came. Even the security guard from day one. It became known as the Silent March of the People. They walked through markets, past schools, hospitals, and cemeteries. Along the way, Traoré shook every hand he could. When they reached the final stop, he turned and said, "You don't need to raise your voices to be heard. Walk in truth, and the world will follow." But what Traoré didn't know was that someone from outside the country had been secretly watching the entire week unfold. A young journalist from Ségou, Mariam Dof, had arrived days earlier for the event. She was sent by an African news outlet to cover the ceremony. But what she witnessed was beyond headlines. She filmed everything the moment Traoré was blocked. At the gate, his silent kindness to the confused guard, his time with the orphan girl, the walk through the city, every gesture, every tear. She uploaded clips daily to her private channel, and after the silent march, her latest post read, "I came to report on a leader. I found a father to the broken, a listener to the poor, and a heart the world forgot existed." The video went viral overnight. Millions of Africans shared it, and then came a surprise, an invitation from the African Union. They wanted Traoré to speak not about economics, not politics, but on how to lead with heart. Traoré simply replied, "Let me first finish walking with my people," because, even with the world watching, His eyes were still on home. The final day of the event had arrived. Everyone expected a grand presidential speech. Flags were raised, the stage was decorated, and global media had arrived. But when Ibrahim Traoré finally stood on stage, he said nothing. Instead, he called up 5 ordinary citizens: the widow, the teacher, the street boy, the disabled girl, and the farmer from earlier in the week. One by one, they spoke for him, and the world watched in awe. No slogans, no applause lines, just truth, pain, hope, and honor. When it was his turn to speak, he looked into the crowd and said, "This country has enough of my voice. It's time we listen to yours. I am not here to be celebrated. I'm here to serve." Then, he stepped back. The entire arena went silent, and then, suddenly, a wave of applause erupted loud. Endless, emotional. People cried openly, many dropped their phones just to clap harder. That moment became known online as the speech that changed nothing and everything. But the biggest surprise of the week was still to come. After the applause, Ibrahim Traoré vanished from the stage. He didn't stay for interviews. He didn't take photos with dignitaries. He simply walked away alone, into the crowd. People called out to him, but he just waved, smiling. Later, a young boy from the village said he saw the president helping an old woman push a wheelbarrow. Near the back gate, that image of president in the dust, pushing a wheelbarrow, was captured by a teenager on a blurry phone camera. It became the most shared photo in West Africa that year. Under it, someone wrote, "Leadership is not a crown. It's a cloth you use to wipe the tears of your people." And that's how the week ended. No scandals, no drama, just one quiet man who showed that the loudest kind of power is silent compassion. And from that day on, even those who once doubted him began to say, "That's my president." To my amazing viewers, if this story touched your heart, if it made you cry, if it reminded you what real leadership can look like, please like this video, leave a comment with your favorite part, and don't forget to subscribe because more stories like this are coming. Let's make the world feel again. Let's honor our heroes. Let's remind the world who Ibrahim Traoré really is. See you in the next one.